Coming up on this Thursday edition of Daybreak, North Korea demands the United States stop meddling in inter-Korean affairs, accusing Washington of stirring up tension whenever the two Koreas appear to be making progress. As efforts towards a possible Korea-Japan summit pick up steam, a Korean lawmaker will pass a note from President Park Geun-hye to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Thursday. Plus, in a new video posted online, Al-Qaeda in Yemen claims responsibility for the terror attack on the offices of Charlie Hebdo, which left 12 people dead. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Thursday, January 15th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning, North Korea has stepped up its criticism of the United States after Washington rejected its offer to cancel joint military drills with South Korea in exchange for a temporary suspension of nuclear testing. The North has also cautioned the US against meddling in inter-Korean affairs, blaming it for stirring up tensions on the peninsula. Hwang Sang-hee starts us off.
After offering to temporarily suspend its nuclear tests for an end to joint South Korea-US military drills, North Korea proposed direct talks with the United States. In a press conference on Tuesday, North Korea's deputy ambassador to the UN said it was willing to explain the offer, but claimed Washington's rejection reflected its hostility.
The United States has shown once again that they will continue to increase attack military capabilities in the South Korea, while requesting us to not to have our own national defense capabilities.
Seoul and Washington insist their annual training exercises, scheduled for March, are defensive in nature, but Pyongyang sees them as a practice for war. In its state-run Nodongshinmun newspaper on Wednesday, North Korea advised the U.S. to step out of inter-Korean affairs. The paper claimed that Washington has always stirred up confrontation whenever there were signs of easing tensions on the Korean peninsula. It called on South Korea to work together with the North to counter the American interference. Analysts see this as part of North Korea's efforts to increase pressure on Seoul. President Park Geun-hye and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un had both expressed their willingness to improve ties in the new year. But while North Korea blames Washington for disturbing the mood for dialogue, it has yet to respond to South Korea's offer for talks, which was made over 2 weeks ago. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, US President Barack Obama is going to lay out plans next week to protect American consumers and businesses from cyber threats. A White House official says Obama has already been introducing related legislative proposals and executive actions that will be part of his State of the Union address next Tuesday. They tackle things such as identity theft and privacy issues, cybersecurity and broadband access. A diplomatic source says there is a very good chance Obama will mention North Korea by name during the State of the Union after Pyongyang's alleged hacking attack on Sony Pictures. Now, adding to Washington's recent cyber woes, the Twitter and YouTube accounts for the US Central Command were also taken over by hackers this week who claim to be working on behalf of the terror group that calls itself Islamic State. Now, despite their kind of strained ties at the moment, trading volume between the two Koreas hit a record high last year, exceeding $2.1 billion US. Now, most of the items traded were raw materials and finished goods from the inter-Korean industrial complex in Kaesong. In 2013, when the complex was shut down for about 6 months, amid very high inter-Korean tensions, trade volume for the entire year of 2013 was just over $1 billion. Now, President Park Geun-hye is going to pass on a message to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on this Thursday through a representative of Korea's ruling party. The Saenuri Party Supreme Council member Seo Chung-won is now in Japan. He's on a 3-day visit with a group of Korean lawmakers affiliated to the Korea-Japan Parliamentarians Union. Lawmakers say the message is not in the form of an official letter as such, but it is going to be delivered in person by Seo Chung-won. Of greatest interest is whether this message will include any suggestion of a summit between the two leaders, something that is yet to take place under the current administration. The Korean and Japanese lawmakers that make up this union have vowed to push for a summit by the middle of the year at the latest. And the cabinet of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has approved Japan's largest ever defense budget. The new $42 billion spending plan calls for scores of new maritime aircraft, stealth fighters and vehicles. The boost reflects Abe's push to build a more active military and reinterpret the country's long-standing pacifist constitution. Now, in related news, Japan and China are trying to ease tensions over that disputed island chain in the East China Sea, known as Senkaku in Japan and Diaoyu in China. The two countries have agreed to set up a special hotline to prevent clashes in this very sensitive area. The two sides say they will operate the hotline soon, marking their first discussion on this issue, in actual fact, in well over 2.5 years.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, with the economic crisis unfolding in Russia, the World Bank has downgraded its global growth outlook for this year and the next. In its semi-annual Global Economic Prospects report that was released on Wednesday in Washington, the lender says it expects the world economy to expand by just 3% in 2015. This is down from a projection of 3.4% that was made in June. The report says the strengthening US economy and low oil prices will fail to offset the crisis in Russia, as well as sluggish growth in Europe, China and Japan. The lender identified the major risks as persistently weak global trade and the possibility of financial market volatility when the US Federal Reserve raises rates as planned sometime this year. The World Bank also cut its forecast for 2016 to 3.3% from 3.5%. And Korea's exports to China are projected to actually rebound this year after a poor 2014, which saw Korea's shipments to the world's second largest economy dip for the first time in 5 years. Connie Kim has the details.
Korean policymakers and exporters alike may be heaving a sigh of relief. The country's exports to China are forecast to rebound this year after falling for the first time in 5 years in 2014. Shipments to China are expected to rise 4.5% to $147 billion, according to industry estimates compiled by KOTRA, a state trade promotion agency. It's welcome news given that China is Korea's biggest trading partner, accounting for more than a quarter of Korea's total exports. This year's rise is expected to be fueled by economic recovery forecasts in the United States, which will boost Beijing's outbound shipments to the U.S. About half of all Korean exports to China are intermediary goods that are used to manufacture finished products that are then shipped off to the U.S. and Europe. Experts also say the free trade agreement between Korea and China that could take effect in the second half of this year will also be a contributing factor.
With the Korea-China Free Trade Agreement, Korean companies will have greater access to the Chinese market where they can target the domestic market.
While sluggish recoveries in China and Europe were mainly to blame, China also improved its own supply capacity of intermediary goods. Experts point out that with the growth of domestic demand in China, Korean intermediary goods will remain competitive in the Chinese market for the time being, but in the longer term, local exporters should come up with more finished goods to stand out from the rest of the pack in China. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And staying with economic news, Korea is being advised to follow Singapore's lead when it comes to securing overseas investments. The Korea Economic Research Institute says that while Singapore's economy is only a quarter that of Korea's, it's able to compete for foreign direct investment with countries like the US and China due to its flexible labour market, limited regulations and low taxes. It was ranked 6th by the UN in terms of FDI in 2013 with a total of $64 billion US. Korea, on the other hand, ranked a lowly 21st with a total $12 billion. Korea's Samsung Group is set to invest around $46 billion US this year for facilities and research and development. An official says this year's amount is similar to what the company spent last year. Samsung Electronics, the flagship of Samsung Group, noted about $22 billion will be spent on its three main sectors: memory chips, display and mobile. According to marketing analysts, the conglomerate has been steadily increasing its investment from about $39 billion since 2011. Now, there's an increasing economic disconnect here in Korea. On the one hand, data shows the Korean economy is doing pretty good and is actually outperforming most of its rivals, especially in Europe and the US. But on the flip side of that, many working and middle-class Koreans complain that the quality of their life keeps on getting worse. For a look at why this might be happening, Kwon-soo reports.
The days of growth at a breakneck pace are long gone, and yet the Korean economy has shown steady growth in recent years, even after the 2008 global financial crisis. Even so, there are surveys showing that 8 out of 10 Koreans don't think their life is much better than before.
Life is really hard. It's hard for the unwealthy people. Something must be done about the economy.
Statistics Korea says the size of the country's middle class is contracting. Back in 1990, some 75% of the nation's population was categorized as middle class. Now, the percentage has dropped to below 70%. The number of people in the lowest income bracket, on the other hand, has jumped from 7% to nearly 12% in the same period. In the past 24 years, Korean households saw their average monthly income grow 3.7 times at current prices. But that's been dwarfed by a 6-fold jump in GDP. And an average household has to cope with a 5-fold hike in costs for fixed expenditures like taxes and insurance during the same period. Some economists say this is due to the nation's companies garnering greater benefits from growth than households. There are other factors too.
When the economy grew by 1% in the past, the employment rate grew by around 0.6%. Today, the rate stands at around 0.3%.
Experts say there needs to be a bigger focus on creating more quality jobs in order to increase consumer spending, which would ultimately lead to higher income for the nation's ordinary people. Kwon-soo, Arirang News.
And as a follow-up to Soa's report there, the number of people who found work last year in Korea actually made a big leap forward, but that does not mean the employment situation in the country is improving. For more on how quantity is not translating into quality of jobs, our Choi-sun reports.
The number of Koreans who found jobs in 2014 jumped a 12-year high. Statistics Korea says nearly 25.6 million people found work last year, up more than 530,000 compared to the year 2013. Looking back at the past 5 years, the yearly increase in the number of people with new jobs had expanded significantly. The country's employment rate also gained slightly to reach a 17-year high of 60.2%. By industry, new jobs were created in manufacturing and health and welfare, while fewer jobs were gained in agriculture, fisheries, and finance. However, experts say a large portion of the newly employed were previously inactive in the economy. Many of them are in their 50s and 60s and have returned to the workforce in temporary positions. That, coupled with a decline in the number of jobs for people in their 30s, shows that Korea's job market remains unstable. In fact, the unemployment rate was the highest for young people from the ages of 15 to 29, jumping to 9%. The unemployment rate has also climbed steadily in recent years. What's even more grim for this group is that 1 out of every 5 young people who found jobs started with contracts of less than a year. A recent OECD report said only 11% of temporary workers in Korea secured permanent employment after a year, and the rest either remained or were let go. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Now, President Park Geun-hye wants Korea to stay front and center of the hyper-connected digital revolution, vowing to throw government support behind such efforts. She said the investment would help build momentum for economic growth for the next 3 decades. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
President Park Geun-hye on Wednesday said that Korea will stay at the forefront of the global push to try and connect all objects to the internet, pointing to innovative technologies as top priority.
변화와 발전을 이루어가는 데 있어서 과학기술과 정보방송통신 분야가 혁신과 융합의 플랫폼이 되어야 한다고 생각합니다.
She also vowed to enhance the country's competitiveness by linking key industries, including automobile, electronics, and construction to the ICT sector. It's a move that the president believes will push economic growth.
초연결 디지털 혁명에서도 한 발 앞서 나가서 향후 30년의 경제성장 동력을 마련할 수 있도록 정부는 최선을 다해 지원할 것입니다.
Korea is one of the most wired countries in the world, a far cry from what it was following the Korean War just half a century ago. As part of efforts to stay ahead of the IT revolution and promote policies aimed at revitalizing the domestic economy, President Park reinforced her commitment to ease regulations that hinder scientific research, development, and investment. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following this Thursday morning in Seoul. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news center. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. We have a claim of responsibility this morning in last week's horrific attack at the headquarters of Charlie Hebdo that left 12 people dead. In a video posted online, a leader of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Nasser bin al-Yalanzi, said the slaughter was vengeance for the magazine's satirical depictions of the Prophet Muhammad. He said Yemeni-American preacher Anwar al-Awlaki had masterminded the strike. Al-Awlaki was killed in a CIA-led drone strike in Yemen in 2011. That's also the year the main suspects of the magazine's siege, Sharif and Said Kouachi, are said to have gone to Yemen. The ideologue in the video did not say the kosher supermarket attack was the work of its followers. U.S. officials confirmed the video as authentic but are still probing its claims. Meanwhile, France's flagship aircraft carrier, the Charles de Gaulle, has been sent to Iraq to aid in the war against the Islamic State group. Aboard the nuclear-powered vessel, French President François Hollande said the current situation justified the presence of the aircraft carrier. Sold out. Even before daylight hit Paris on Wednesday, people were huddled at newsstands to be among the first to purchase the so-called survivors issue of Charlie Hebdo, which sold out within hours in Paris. The first issue since the irreverent weekly was targeted in a terror attack 1 week earlier had an initial print run of 3 million copies to be distributed in stages. This as French authorities have arrested 54 people for hate speech and defending terror attacks. Among them was a comedian, Dieudonné Mbala, on potential charges of glorifying terrorism. He had before faced accusations of anti-Semitism. Now, none of those arrested have been directly linked to the terror attacks. France has deployed 10,000 troops and 120,000 security forces amid its highest terror alert. And in the latest update in the AirAsia disaster, a Singaporean Navy ship has located the main body of the passenger jet that crashed in the Java Sea last month. In a Facebook post on Wednesday, Singapore's defense minister revealed images of the plane's fuselage. The photos were taken by an underwater vehicle and showed the damaged wing and pieces of the AirAsia slogan painted on the exterior hull. Indonesia's National Search and Rescue Agency has confirmed the discovery and is now redirecting divers to the crash site. It is believed that most of the missing victims are trapped inside that fuselage. 162 people were on board the airliner when it lost contact on December 28th. Pope Francis is drawing huge interfaith crowds in Sri Lanka, surprising even the Vatican. Hundreds of thousands of Sri Lankans lined up to meet the pontiff in Colombo. He canonized Sri Lanka's first saint in a public mass, Indian-born missionary Joseph Vows, who had been captured in Ceylon for being a spy. Traveling to a Catholic shrine at a former war zone, Pope Francis also called for reconciliation, justice, and peace in the island nation still dealing with a legacy of a quarter-century-long civil war. Pope Francis heads to the Philippines on this Thursday.
And a good Thursday morning to you all as we kick things off with the Korean national football team, where despite advancing to the quarterfinals of the 2015 Asian Cup, there's still a lot of uncertainties with the team, especially with the lack of offense. Now, compared the Korean national team and the Australian national team, who both have 2 wins in Group A so far, they're completely different teams despite the record. While Korea advanced to the quarterfinals with a pair of 1-0 victories against Oman and Kuwait, Australia is one of the hottest teams in the tournament, scoring 8 goals against similar opponents. And with the 2 nations set to face off on Saturday, the good news is Son Heung-min will be back in the lineup after ailing from a flu, as he hopes to spark the offense the team desperately needs. Now, win or lose on Saturday, the Korean national football team will advance to the quarterfinals. But for the North Korean national football team, well, the tournament came to an early end after their second loss on Wednesday. Now, a must-win situation for the North Korean national football team on Wednesday after their 1-0 loss to Uzbekistan last Saturday in their first group stage match. But North Korea checked that, unable to stop the barrage of goals from Saudi Arabia as they lose 4-1 and were eliminated from the 2015 Asian Cup. Now, the last time the North has won the Asian Cup was back 35 years ago. Now, if Kang Jong-ho knew how to speak like a pirate, he would have said "weigh anchor" on Wednesday as he left for Pittsburgh. Now, weigh anchor meaning let's go. Now, with the 28-year-old slugger leaving for Pittsburgh via Incheon International Airport, a press conference was held before his departure as he stated that nothing has been finalized despite the reports of him signing a 4-year deal worth $16 million. But he did sound excited as he talked about facing off against his good friend Yoo Hyun-jin, even adding that Yu's English is still worse than his. Well, speaking of which, while Yoo Hyun-jin of the LA Dodgers has enjoyed 2 years of success so far, Yoon Sung-min of the Baltimore Orioles, not so much, and it's not going to get better. Now, the former Kia Tigers ace, who spent his entire 2014 season in the minor leagues, will not be invited to spring camp. This, according to his manager, Buck Showalter. Instead, he'll be sent to train at a minor league spring camp, leaving his future in doubt. Of course, with his contract having only a minor league option only in his first year, if he does get called up to the majors, he cannot be sent back down to the minors. And unfortunately, the latest move shows the team isn't keen on having him on their 25-man roster. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. The weather should feel more like early March than mid-January today here in Seoul, with high picking up to 7 this afternoon. And even right now, the current temperature stands at a freezing mark, and that's 6 degrees higher than the seasonal averages. And today will be brighter than yesterday. More sun will be shining down on us throughout the day. And good news for people in the east, dry weather advisor has been finally lifted, and they will receive rain of up to 5 millimeters till this afternoon, and the rest of the peninsula will see a mix of light rain and snow flurries tomorrow morning. With that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the daily low in Seoul has kicked off at -2, then the high will climb up to 7, while Daegu and Gwangju both peak at 9, and Busan will climb up to 11 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, it looks like Jeju Island will see a high of 9, and Daejeon and Dokdo will be topping out at 8 and 5, respectively. That's all for now. Back to you, Mark, in the studio.
Thank you very much, Jiyeon, for the weather there. And that's all we have for you at this hour. Korea Today is coming up at 7 a.m. Korea time. We'll be back throughout the day with many more news updates, and I'll be back at 10 a.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.